Welcome to the Grove Podcast, where we feature Evergreen members and their real-life stories of salvation, transformation, struggle, and hope. Today we have Jimmie Don Gibson. Jimmie Don and I have a fun little connection. He actually was the pastor of my in-laws when they were back in college. So I think it's really neat that our paths have crossed. Tell me, who are you married to? How many kids do you all have?
I'm married to Joyce Elaine Parsons. I have 3 children.
Mm-hmm. Where do you and your wife serve at Evergreen?
I have been a Sunday school teacher and a director of Sunday school class. Mm-hmm. I'm the game leader for Sparky's.
Oh,
have
fun.
done that for 5 years. I've also am a life shepherd. It's called JZ's Dozen.
Oh, wow. You guys have like a whole name.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have like baseball shirts?
No,
everything?
but we're thinking about it, Okay. And I've also done book studies in the senior adult group for men.
Yeah.
I think that's covered most of it. Oh, yeah. Joyce and I both have been leaders in VBS since we've been here. I teach 5th grade or 6th grade kids. Yeah. She'll do any age group.
All right.
But I like the older kids.
So you guys have your hands in a lot of the ministries going on here.
Yeah. And for a while, I was the backup drummer for the first worship service for a while.
Wow. Yeah. You've done a lot. And you all haven't been members for very long. How long have you been at Evergreen?
Going on 7 years.
Oh, 7 years. Okay.
Yeah, going on 7 years.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. We're going to just go ahead and jump into your story. Let's start with you sharing what your life verse is.
I had to preach a sermon right after I surrendered to ministry. Mm-hmm. And my pastor of the very next Sunday said I'd be preaching. Mm-hmm. So I went down by the pond and with my Bible and notepad, and I started saying, what, Lord? And he led me to this verse, Matthew 6:33-34. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. And don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow has enough problems. Today has enough problems of its own.
Yeah.
JD's version of that.
Yeah.
And but I made that little sermon. That was what I did. But that has stayed with me. If you put God first in all that you do, he'll take care of the mess. Yeah. He'll provide for you. He'll be there for you. Yeah. And worry, Jesus told us not to worry.
Yeah.
And that's very hard to do. But I've learned a lot about doing that.
Yeah.
There's things you can't handle, you can't do. But if you're doing what God wants you to do, you'll get through it alive.
Well, that's awesome. So let's back up. I know that the whole beginning of your life was a struggle. So why don't you tell us about the day that you were born?
Okay. I was born in the Cushing Hospital, and my dad, a new Christian, was waiting anxiously to hear the news that he had a son. He didn't know what he had. He found out he had a son. But then the doctor there in Cushing told him that I was a blue baby.
What does that mean?
It meant I had a problem with my heart.
Okay.
They told my dad I wouldn't live through the night.
Wow. So
my dad went down into the basement of that hospital and found a men's room.
Yeah.
And he got on his knees and he prayed.
Mm.
And after his prayer time, he came back up, and the doctor said, if he does live through the night, he won't live very long. Mm. So don't get your hopes up. And that was it.
Wow.
So I was born with a hole in my heart they said was the size of a nickel. And over a period of time, it moved itself, repositioned the heart, and moved over. So I've been able to say for my entire life, my heart is in the wrong place.
There you go. So you were born with this heart condition. Mm-hmm. And now, weren't you like one of the first in your area to have?
No, I was the very first to live.
Okay. After a heart surgery?
So my parents found a heart specialist named Dr. Freed. Mm-hmm. He told my parents, I was 2 weeks old when I went to him for the first time. Mm-hmm. And then he said, there's no medicine that will help this. The only thing that's going to help this is someone come up with a surgery that can be used to heal people with these kind of ailments. And so he said, so the thing you need to do is pray that God will inspire someone to develop a surgery that can be used to save your son's life.
Wow.
He estimated I would live to be 13 without a surgery. So he, at his own expense, had heard that there was a team of surgeons in France doing a new surgery called open heart. So he got on a plane, went to France, and spent time there with them and watched them do the procedure.
Wow.
And then he came back to the United States, and he found out that a team was going to be assembled at the University Hospital in Oklahoma City to do this surgery.
Okay.
So then you had to get your name on the list.
Sure.
Well, he jumped on that, and without talking to my parents, he put my name on the list.
Okay.
To reserve a spot.
Yeah.
And then my dad and mom had a powwow with me and said, Jimmie Don, there's this surgery.
Yeah.
And you're going to either do it this summer or next.
How old were you at this time?
At that time, I was 9 years old.
Okay.
And so I said, let's get it done. So we went to the hospital. They ran some tests, and they told me I would be number 11.
Okay.
What they didn't tell me, nor my parents, was all 10 ahead of me died.
Wow.
My hometown got behind me. Every club did fundraisers because they knew how expensive it was going to be. We didn't really know. We just knew it was going to be really expensive.
Sure.
I would need 21 pints of fresh blood drawn that day.
Wow.
So, it was quite an ordeal. My picture was in the paper a lot, and but it was interesting. I remember sitting outside the office of the financial administrator of the hospital.
Yeah.
And I could hear everything was said. And he said, "How are you going to pay for this, Mr. Gibson?"
Yeah.
And he said, "I'll sell my cows. We'll sell our farm. We'll do whatever it takes. My son's having the surgery." He said, oh, and I do have this. And he pulled out an insurance card, Blue Cross and Blue Shield.
How did you guys get insurance with you
Well, that was an interesting story. My dad loved to tell this story. When I was born, he had a good friend that was just starting out in the insurance business with Blue Cross and Blue Shield.
Yeah.
He came to the house and said, "Hayden, let's write a policy on Jimmie Don." He said, "Now, there's one square here, and it says, do you have a pre-existing condition? We're leaving that blank."
Uh-oh.
Now, if the girls in the office don't catch it, they'll issue the policy, and they will stand behind it. The only person in my family that had insurance was me.
Wow.
So I checked into the hospital. I remember the pastor coming to see me, and he'd baptized me just the summer before, the year before. And he said, "Jimmie Don, you could die." He said, "Let me tell you something, son. You're going to go to sleep. And if you die, you're going to wake up with Jesus. If not, you're going to wake up in ICU."
Yeah.
Which
one's better?
Brother Williams was so compassionate.
Yeah.
I just went, okay.
Yeah.
This is exciting.
Put it into perspective.
But 2 nights before I had the surgery, they rushed a teenager in. Put him in the bed right next to me in the ward there, the heart ward I was in.
Yeah.
And I said to him, "What happened to you?"
Yeah.
"I had open heart surgery and it didn't work."
Oh.
And then he started spazzing out, and then he died.
Right there next
right
to
in
you.
front of me. The next morning, the whole surgery team surrounded my bed and said, "Now, Jimmie, now that's not fair because that boy was told to go home and do no physical labor or exercise."
Yeah.
The same we've been telling you and your parents.
Yeah.
You can't overdo. He went out on wheat harvest.
Wow.
And it all broke loose.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he died. But you're not going to do that, right? Wheat harvest? Me? No, I won't do anything. And so anyway, it brought it all home.
Yeah.
So the night before the surgery, I prayed. Okay, Lord, you gave me this opportunity. And either it's going to work or I'll see you after a while. And I said, amen. And I went to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
The nurses, they came down to give me the hypo to put me to sleep, and I was already asleep.
Wow.
So I missed 3 shots. Hallelujah.
Yeah.
They woke me up the next morning, made me scrub in the shower, and then put me on a cart. The only thing I don't remember anything except waking up in ICU, but my parents were in the waiting room.
Mm-hmm.
And there were 2 men wearing suits,
Mm-hmm.
and they were talking to each other, and they didn't know who my parents were.
Yeah.
And this man said, if this child dies, we're shutting this program down.
Wow.
I'm tired of having funerals of children. And if they can't get it right this time. And my mother went, this time?
Oh.
And she said, how many people have had this?
Yeah.
Said this boy that we're having in here today, he's number 11, but all 10 before him have died. So the doctor who did the surgery, the lead doctor, came out of surgery, did not change out of his scrubs. He was covered in my blood and the blood from the transfusions.
Uh-huh.
And when he came walking up to my mother, she fainted. Then she tells this, she likes to tell this story. She says, I've seen my son's heart. Because they took her and my dad into the operating room. They woke me up. My chest was wide open.
Yeah.
I couldn't see it. And they stood there and watched my heart beating, and they were looking for leaks. And, of course, there were no leaks. They'd sewn it up. And then they put me back to sleep.
Oh, wow.
And I slept for 3 days and 3 nights.
Wow.
Just like Jesus.
Wow.
And they woke me up, and I had a complication in this leg. I had gotten a blood clot because they did not straighten it. If that hadn't happened, I would have gotten out of the hospital the 4 or 5 days after the surgery. But as it was, I was in the hospital most of the summer trying to get this blood clot taken care of. And then I went back to school.
Okay.
And so I'd always been an average student, but the longer I got past the surgery, my grades started improving. I had more energy and I had more, and that helped a lot. When my daughter got married to my son-in-law, Aaron, we were talking about this, and I said, I made the front page of the New York papers.
Yeah.
He said, oh, no, you didn't. I said, oh, yes, I did. So he got on the library microfiche and found the article.
Okay.
In the New York Times on
from
the front
when
page,
you were a child?
when I had the surgery.
Yeah.
It was so rare.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the first total success this side of the Mississippi.
Okay.
So that's the heart story.
Yeah. I love that. Okay. So you had a successful surgery, and you said that you were 9, right, at the time? But you had found the Lord as an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
My sister told me I was going to go to hell. We were washing dishes, and she handed me a dish and said, if you died tonight, you'd go to hell. And so we had to run an argument in a brother-sister type thing, and my little brother was just going, what's going on? Yeah. And so she said, well, let's just go ask Dad. And so we woke him up, and Selena, my sister, said, I told Jimmie Don that if he died tonight, he could go to hell. Mm. And I said, well, no. He said, well, now, maybe. And so we went on the front porch, and he walked me through the Roman road. Mm-hmm. And I knew all the answers. I'd been in Bible school, Sunday school all my life, And so, but what I had never done, I had never asked Jesus into my heart. Yeah. And I did. So my sister.
Little evangelist.
Yes, she was. She was a little evangelist.
Yeah.
But but my sister was also the one that introduced me to my wife.
Sounds like a great sister. Okay, so then the next year is when you had your surgery, and that was successful. Tell me about the next part of your life. You started getting into music? Or?
Well, I did. I got in the 5th grade. I went to the band. You could go down and have they had a display of all different instruments. You could go down and pick the instruments you want to play. Okay. And so I went down and I picked up saxophone. That's what I wanted to play. Mm-hmm. And my band director knew my mother very well, and he knew I'd had this surgery, and I still didn't have very much wind. He handed me a pair of drumsticks. He said, "This is it." I never got to march in the Christmas parade because I had a heart condition. And I couldn't carry a drum. Okay. And my 6th grade year, my dad asked my doctor if I could do it. Yeah. And he said, "Yeah."
Okay.
but not a heavy drum.
Yeah.
Well, I told that to the band director, and he found a lightweight wooden marching drum. I marched the entire parade and played, and my dad ran the sidewalk. He didn't know if I was going to make it or not, but I did. Band was the biggest thing in my life in school.
Okay. And then at the age of 13, you went to Falls Creek.
Right.
Yeah.
First night there, I knew he was calling me to the ministry, and I told him no. I didn't want to be a preacher.
Okay.
I tried to bargain with God. I told him I would teach Sunday school. I would even be a deacon like my dad. I was active in my youth group, but I didn't want to be a preacher.
Well, so you're trying to run from this call.
Yeah.
And there's a summer where you needed a job, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, what happened there?
I had saved up money to go to college, and I had scholarships. But my dad had lost his job because of health problems, and they couldn't make the mortgage on the farm. So that meant I had to go to work.
Yeah.
So my grandfather got me a job driving a dump truck.
Okay.
But my dad, he conspired against me. So I came home, threw my suitcase in my bedroom, and I came out, and my dad said, "You need to go see the preacher. He's got a job for you." So I went down, and I saw Brother Bob, and I said, "Hey, Dad says you've got a job for me." "Yes, I do." He said, "I want you to be my summer youth leader."
Okay. So Dad and the youth pastor.
And I said, "No, I was running." So anyway, I went back home, and my dad said, "Well?" I said, "I told him no." And my dad said, "Do you like your mom's cooking?"
Uh-oh.
And I said, "Yeah." "Do you want your mom to do your laundry?" "Yeah." "You want to live in my house?" "Yeah." "Then you better go back down there and tell him yes.
Wow.
Or find you another place to live."
Yeah.
So I did the youth. And I decided if I was going to have to do it, we were going to party.
There you go.
We're going to go to the drive-in. We're going to go to the lake. We're going to have fun. But these ornery young people, they kept coming to me with Bible questions. And I would have to dig out the Bible and find the answers for them.
Yep.
But they were having a Falls Creek service. And I was standing with the kids in the back. And my brother gave a great testimony about doing what God wants you to do with your life. I was holding on to the pew for dear life.
Yeah.
God had been talking to me. He said, "I saved your life for a reason."
Yeah.
So I walked it 3 rows down and put my arms around my parents and said, "I got to go." And they carried me down front. And my pastor, Brother Bob Ross, said, "Tell me." I said, "I feel called to the ministry." He said, "I know. I've known it for 2 years, ever since I met you at Falls Creek." So I surrendered to preach. And then my dad stood up and said, I got something I got to tell the church. And Jimmie Don doesn't know this. He said when he was born, he was a blue baby. Doctor said he wouldn't live.
Yeah.
So I went down to the men's room, got on my knees as a new Christian, and I said, "Lord, please let my son live. I'll raise him for you. And you can use him."
Wow.
Very Old Testament.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like that's a Bible story somewhere.
Yeah, very Old Testament. So I got licensed to preach, preached my first sermon, then I went back to college at East Central. And I thought I was doomed. I couldn't find a church that wanted to call me as a pastor. And they all loved it when I would come and preach as fill-in around there, but nobody wanted to call me. I had several offers, though, to be a youth minister. But I wanted to be the next Billy Graham, man. I do not want to be a youth minister.
Yeah.
And so I would always tell them no.
Yeah.
And God was saying, "Hey, son, I got a job for you." And I would say, "No, I want to preach. I want to be, somebody like Billy Graham."
Yeah.
But anyway, we were broke. we got to the bottom of our our jar of money, and I was working around the farm doing anything because I felt so guilty.
Yeah.
And I had no money,
Mm-hmm.
but I got a notice, a phone call, or that the school owed me $25.
Mm.
I went into the administration building, and they had a refund check for me, and I got $25. And I came out of the building, and there was a girl that I had disdained, and I didn't want to have anything to do with that girl.
Uh-huh.
She was dangerous.
Uh-huh.
And she said, "Hey, Jimmie Don, don't you have a degree in English?"
Uh-huh.
I said, "Yeah, and speech." "Why?"
Yeah.
"Hey, well, there's an opening at Seminole High School, and they need somebody to teach 7th grade English and journalism and yearbook."
Yeah.
I said, "I haven't taken journalism since high school." She said, "Yeah, but weren't you the editor of that BSU newspaper?"
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Well, yeah." "There you go." He said, "Here's
go.
the phone number." She had it written down and handed it to me.
Wow.
And I took a quarter, went in and got on the phone, called the secretary. The secretary said, "I do not have a degree in journalism. I did yearbook in high school. I was in journalism in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I've been a writer and editor of the BSU newsletter."
Mm-hmm.
She says, "Come on."
There
Just
you
like
go.
that.
Yeah.
So I drove straight to Seminole from Ada, and I met the superintendent. And I said, "I'll clean toilets. I'll do whatever you want, man. I need a job."
Yeah.
He said, "I have a woman who's pregnant. She's going to take a leave of absence." And it's somebody I knew I went to college with.
Okay.
And he said, "She'll have her contract back, so you'll just be teaching one semester."
Uh-huh.
I said, "One semester is great."
Yeah.
So we moved to Seminole, got an apartment above a garage repair shop. That's the first real job I had.
As a teacher.
Teaching school. It was so much fun. And the kids,
Mm-hmm.
they kept saying, come go to our church. Come go to our church." So we decided to go.
Okay.
We went to First Baptist Church, Seminole, and they were having an after church fellowship with the youth.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, "Come on down to the fellowship. Come down to the fellowship, Mr. Gibson. Bring your wife. Come on." So we went down, and they had parents standing around.
Yeah.
And they had food, but then everything else.
Mm.
They had no games. They had no plans.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked one of the mothers, "Who's leading the games?"
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, we don't have anybody. We don't have a youth minister."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Oh, that's not good."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Well, now, if you'd like."
Yeah.
My wife and I were on the fellowship game team.
Yeah.
At East Central at the BSU. "We'll be glad to do a fellowship with you guys."
Yeah.
So we did. And the kids loved it. We played a bunch of fun games that we always played at these fellowships. And we just had a good time.
Yeah.
And so I go to school on Monday. And I get a note that the pastor wants to meet with me.
Okay.
And so I'm going, ooh. So I walked down to the school because we only had one car, and Joyce had that, and she was at school. And so walked down there, and the first thing he said out of his mouth was, "You will not get the youth position in this church."
Wow.
And I said, "Excuse me?"
Hmm.
"I know what you were doing. You're trying to weasel your way into our church and get the youth position. That's what you did." I said, "No, what I did was fill the gap that was there. And I just played some fun games with your kids because there was nobody there to do that."
Yeah.
And he told me in no uncertain terms that I was not welcome in his church.
Well, that's not very nice.
So we didn't go there anymore. We found a small Baptist church, and I taught Sunday school.
Okay.
But then I taught that semester. My superintendent really liked me, and he put in a good word with another superintendent friend.
Mm-hmm.
And they had an opening, 2 openings actually, one for remedial English and one for honors English. We moved out, and they gave me, the school gave me what they call a teacher reach. And we were going to Fairview Baptist Church, and they had asked me to pray about being their youth minister, and they'd pay me $10 a week.
Okay.
And then I got invited to preach at a little church called a Highway Baptist Church.
Mm-hmm.
So I did. I filled the pulpit 2 or 3, 4 times. And then one Sunday morning after the sermon and invitation, this woman stands up, Darlene Williams stands up and says, I make a motion we call Jimmie Don as pastor.
Wow.
And I said, that's not the way it's done.
Yeah.
You have to have a pulpit committee, blah, blah, interview, look at background checks,
Yeah.
She says, okay, then we'll do that. And they did. And they offered me the job. And I took it. But see, the first time I went in view of a call, they didn't call me. Mm. See, I went to a church, or I knew I was going to be teaching at Strother. And this church was right close to the school. It's called Twin Oaks. And one of my boys from my journalism class at Seminole was the music minister. And he gave them my name. I'd led music in a revival at that church. I thought, well, this is great. So Sunday morning I preached, and we had 2 come for rededication, 1 come to join, and 1 got saved.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a great service.
Yeah, so it looked like that would be the place.
Well, the director of missions called up the chairman of the committee and said, I need to meet with you and your church. Have an emergency meeting at the church with all who want to know about the real Jimmie Don Gibson. Oh, no. 1, my wife was pregnant, and she conceived, of course, before we were married. And, of course, that was not true at all. My car was being repossessed. My dad gave me the car. It cost $250. He told them I played in a rock and roll band. He told them I danced at the senior prom. And all kinds of garbage like that. Yeah. So I already told the church, I'm not going to preach. I'm going to just give you my testimony and then let you ask me questions. Did your wife get pregnant before you got married? No. Is your car being repossessed? No. Did you play in a rock and roll band in high school? Yes. Did you dance at senior prom? Yes. They didn't call me. Wow. It was a slow dance, and I danced with my wife. And why did he had never met me.
So he was making up a lot of things.
Oh,
That's strange.
I thought,
not Seminole, the place.
This, oh my gosh. And, I'm going to say this. If you're doing what God wants you to do, there will be problems. There will be people who will not like you and who will try to make your life miserable. So we had gone down to seminary and were told that we had to submit our application at least a year in advance, or 6 months to a year in advance. I didn't know that. I thought I could do just like the Central, walk into the administrative building, say, hi, I'm here, let's enroll. Yeah. Here's the money. Sure. But they said, no, we have to have a background check. We have to have references. So why don't you just go find you a place to live and get a job, and then next year you can go to seminary. So got in the car with my wife, and I said, I'll never come back to this place again. And we went home. And then I got the job at Strother, and that worked out. I taught 2 years there, and I knew after pastoring for 2 years, I knew I needed to go to seminary. They didn't want me to leave, but I had to step out in faith, and I prayed. And I said, all right. And so we did the paperwork, and we drove to seminary after that school year was out. It was interesting when I got ordained. My pastor from high school and college came to do the sermon, but I was worried because that director of missions had never darkened the door of my church, but he was still there as director of missions. And normally at an ordination, the director of mission does the ordinating. So I was worried. The day of the ordination came, we had a full house. But I noticed there were 2 men standing on either side of the back door. I thought, what are they doing? We were just getting ready to start the ordination service. And all of a sudden, the director of missions walked in. And all of a sudden, he got spun around, and they interlocked their arms between his and marched him back to the parking lot, put him in his car, and said, don't ever come back again. He had come to disrupt the service.
So you were called by Highway Baptist? Okay.
And then I went to seminary. And
where did you go to seminary?
I went down at Fort Worth, Southwestern Baptist.
Very nice.
It was a great school, great time. Had so much fun there. We have lifelong friends that we made at seminary. We still go on vacation and trips and get together. It was a great bond. And then I went to Calvary Baptist Church in
Okay.
Shawnee, Oklahoma, and I was there 23 years.
And that's where you met my in-laws, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yep. She taught my kids piano and played the piano.
Yeah.
And Mark taught a Sunday school class for young married OBU students.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Had a good time.
So you were there for 23 years. You guys have 3 children.
We have 2 still living.
Mm-hmm. Just give me a little bit about that story real fast.
Jay was a very intelligent and very handsome young man. Took after his father. And he was a National Merit Scholar.
Yeah.
He can go anywhere he wanted to go, and he chose OU. He went to a BSU fellowship, a retreat, and they played a dumb game, and he broke his nose in 6 places. And he had to have surgery. But he had that during the fall break. He got the surgery, and he seemed to be doing just great. He went back to college. Mm-hmm. And the day he was supposed to come home for Christmas break, he was taking a shower and singing a praise song, and he collapsed in the shower. His roommate heard him fall, rushed in, thought he was clowning around with him, but he realized he wasn't breathing. He started CPR and yelled for help, and another young man came, and they were giving mouth-to-mouth and CPR, and called an ambulance, got there, and within less than 3 minutes, got him to the Norman Hospital. They couldn't revive him.
Wow.
I got the phone call at church. We were doing fruit baskets for the senior adults. Mm-hmm. And at first they said, he's fallen. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh, he'll live. Mm-hmm. You know. And then they called back, it's more serious. Please come. So I got Joyce. We drove. Stopped about halfway to Oklahoma City, pulled off Southern Road, because I've been doing 80 and 90 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. I just felt that I needed to pray. Mm-hmm. And we prayed. Now, I've been a volunteer chaplain at the hospital for 20 years. Mm-hmm. I know the drill. The chaplain met me at the door. Mm-hmm. I knew he was gone. Then they take you to a room where they can talk to you. What do you do? How do you call your parents and his grandparents and say, your grandson's dead, and we don't know why? We weren't ready for it. And years later, a doctor said it was probably an air embolism that was in your son's system, but when it hit the brain, it turned it off. And there's nothing you can do about it. And that the minute you start doing an autopsy and you cut a vein, it's gone. So that's what we think happened. Mm-hmm. We don't know for sure.
Yeah.
He had co-wrote the Vesper Service play for the at OU. He wanted to make Christian movies, but he didn't get to do it. It really was hurtful to Josh. They were so close. And it was really hard not to be mad at God, not to feel like I'd been cheated.
Sure.
And worry about everything. The church was very, very supportive. They gave me a leave of absence. Mm-hmm. They had prayer times for us. They were very. I was offered a church, a nice church in Norman, wanted me to come be their pastor. And a friend of mine was on the pulpit committee. Mm-hmm. We'd gone to high school together. And I just had to tell Dalton, I can't leave Calvary. They're my support group. Mm-hmm. They understand if I start crying in the middle of a sermon. Yeah. They understand what's going on in my life. Your church won't. Mm-hmm. And I said, and they deserve somebody who's got it all together, and I don't have it all together. Yeah. It took time for us to get past it. You never get past it. Mm-hmm. Okay, let me make that very clear. You lose a child, you never get past it. Mm-hmm. You just learn how to cope with it. Yeah. You have to trust God. You've got to visualize him in heaven and know that he'd rather be there than be here, and go on with your life and say, I know I'm going to heaven too. I'll be bugging him every day through eternity.
There you go.
And
but you were the pastor at Calvary when that happened.
Yeah.
And is that where you retired from?
I retired from the pastorate there. Yes, okay. I did.
And then long story short, you ended up here at Evergreen.
Well, 10 years later, I ended up here.
Okay.
Because when I retired from Calvary, I went to prison.
Oh, yes, you did.
I did. 10-year stretch.
Well, just clarify what you mean there.
I was the chaplain.
Okay. So you were not an inmate.
No.
But you worked within the prison.
I was a chaplain at Jimmie.
Didn't you do a little bit of that ministry here at Evergreen for a little while as well?
For over 7 years, I had served as the director of Genesis 1. Mm-hmm. But this past summer, I stepped away.
Okay.
And some things, I just say I stepped away.
Well, that story of you going to prison, we might need to do another podcast and get some of that.
Oh, I've got stories about prison.
Well, what I want to end with, you had a hard beginning as a child, and your father set you aside for the ministry. What would you have to say to somebody listening to this podcast, somebody, maybe they're an Evergreen member, maybe they're not? What would you have to someone who feels the call to the ministry?
If you're really called to the ministry, do it. Don't worry about money or prestige. Just do what God calls you to do. It's not going to be easy, but God will bless it. One day, you're going to hear Jesus say, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." That's what you live for. God will provide. He knows your gifts. He knows your talents. Improve on them and serve Him.
I think your story also shows that God knows best.
Yeah.
God's ways are above our ways. His thoughts are above our thoughts. And no matter how hard we run, like Jonah, He will call us back to what He has for us.
That's right.
Thank you so much for sharing your story and encouraging us. And hopefully there's somebody out there being called to the ministry who will take your story and run with it. Thank you for tuning in and listening to today's episode. If you have any questions or want to hear about our church, please visit our website at evergreenbc.org. That is evergreenbc.org.